I'm going to go straight for that main one because I want to make sure we do get time to go to that, and we usually run out of time before we run out of questions. So I'm going to combine this with Bill's version of the same thing. Now, for me, Rankbrain has become this new keyword that everyone's latched onto. I'm seeing already companies, selling. Oh, we're the SEOs who've taken into account the latest Rankbrain upgrades, despite the fact they can't possibly because we're all still examining what it does, what its limitations are, and there's no way of knowing that from the outside completely, especially since it seems to combine with several other. Bill has been looking at patents for this, and there's several different patents over a period of years that all relate to each other and are similar, but do slightly different things. Now, my understanding of Hummingbird is that it's led to this, that Hummingbird was kind of giving us the changes around the time of Hummingbird brought in more context, more idea that the meaning of the query was more important than the words of the query. And I think the natural consequence of that was there's times when it isn't. There are times when the way we've worded it is very, very specific. And it seems that Rankbrain is one method of being able to spot. Gary Ilias's example was the word without. That one word was the most important word of the query. How can I complete this without such and such? Without couldn't be changed. So is that kind of where we're going with this? But Bill's point was, we've heard that this is the third most important signal contributing to results now. Would it be beneficial to us to know what the first two is? Could webmasters build better sites if they knew what the first two are?
I can tell you what they are. It's content and links pointing to your site.
In that order or the other order?
There is no order. And I'm not even sure. And the third place is a hotly contested issue. I think it's a funny one. Take this with a grain of salt. I think, it's obviously up to Greg the way he chose to phrase that when he was doing it, and I understand where he was coming from, being somebody who worked on that. The way I interpret his meaning is that if you look at a slew of search results and sort of open up the debugger and see what has come into play for such and such a query, for such and such a page, certain things pop up more or less often. So certain elements of the algorithm come into play for fewer or more pages in fewer or more cases. And so I guess if you do that, then you'd see elements of Rankbrain having been involved in here, rewriting this query, applying it like this over here. And so you'd say, I see this like 2 times as often as the other thing and half as often as the other thing. So it's somewhere on number 3. It's not like having 3 links is X important and having 5 keywords is Y important, and Rankbrain is some Z factor that is also somehow important, and then you multiply all of that. That's not how this works. I think the way we can look at it in a useful way is that we are trying to get better at understanding natural language and at applying machine learning at saying, okay, so what are the meanings behind the inputs? In particular, when you think about the fact that it's still early days, we cannot claim that typed queries, whether mobile or desktop, have reasonably subsided or are going away. But more and more so, people are interacting with their devices using voice. So we can expect the use of stop words and words like, as Gary mentioned, without, maybe other operators of this kind, a lot more often than you would, because people still tend to be a lot more mechanic and kind of overthink their queries a little bit, as I tend to anyway. I tend to think, okay, so what is a query that is completely non-human in nature that sounds like what a machine would understand? Let me type that. I don't know if you guys catch yourselves doing that. You don't generally type a question to Google as you would ask a real person. And I think that's
I do
detect myself when I start doing it in natural languages. Wait, that's wrong. And I realize, oh, wait.
I do structured queries. I kind of, right, what's the most important concept? Right, I'll put that first. Then what's the modifier to that?
And then, so you've got to admit that in this sense, we are pretty advanced users a little bit kind of outside the norm in this sense. And as a company, I guess we're striving towards moving, well, not so much stopping to support us guys, because I think we'll figure our way out, but to start supporting better people who are just joining the net, and to whom, for example, the mobile experience is their first experience, and Google search application is their first experience of interacting with the web and getting answers to their questions. And they don't know that you need to say robotic words and omit commas, dots, ends, stop words, everything. They just speak. And they will say, yeah, how can I complete Mario Kart without cheating? I'm not going to think about the word without in that sense. So it's on to us then to figure out, right, well, what's behind all of that. And I think there was a bit of conversation on Twitter as well with Gary involved about, so what does this affect? Does this affect indexing? Does this affect ranking? And Gary was trying to say, well, no, it doesn't affect ranking. It's not a ranking factor. It becomes a very complex conversation when you get to that, because it's
ultimately everything affects ranking. Otherwise, there's no point having it.
Well, ultimately, I guess so. Yes, I mean, ultimately, even your web page's accessibility affects ranking, because if we can't access them, we can't rank them. You know,
Yeah.
even at that level. But the I guess it doesn't affect the ranking of an individual page. What it does affect is our understanding of a query. And so once our understanding of a query changes, we're very likely to show something different as a result for that, right? So that's the effect that it has. But it's not the same effect as knowing, you know, there's so and so many links pointing to that page, or as knowing that there's such and such words on that page. That's something else. And I think you mentioned Hummingbird. The very sort of initial roots of that are in the synonymization attempts, in attempts at understanding synonyms better and replacing them. All the way back then, those were just libraries. I suppose it's to some extent static libraries. This is much more interesting. This is also, as Greg has said and some of the other guys have said, half jokingly, I guess, we don't know what it's doing because we're not supposed to know, because it's machine learning. That's the whole point. You kind of throw it out there and then it does its stuff. But the ideas behind is this, and they're the same as when we started talking about knowledge graph and introduced it, and that became, you know, now very much part and parcel of our search results. People expect it to be there. People expect that for entities. 3 years ago, I remember it quite vividly. I think it must have been 2013. I was at a conference in Russia, and we introduced this for the first time. It was a bit of a struggle to explain what is it that we're doing. Like, well, what are we doing with all these new things? What are these entities, and how is it different from words? Now people just expect it. You're looking for an actor, you're looking for a city, you're looking for an event. Yeah, you want to see that card. We'll have a thing from a source, some, you know, follow-on links, and it's just, yeah, that's the experience. So this is hopefully enhancing that experience, allowing us to understand what else has that potential, what else can be explained in such a way, what else can be understood better, and things, you know, negative queries, as Gary called them. That's definitely one thing that hopefully is going to work better from now on.
So there's some things that, you know, there's been so much confusion that's spun out of this, and there's some things that I think we can perhaps help people understand a little better here. So as you described it, Andrey, and as in the conversations I've had with Gary about it and other Googlers, so better understand language to help us better match queries with appropriate web pages from a relevance perspective. Sort of period, end of sentence, doesn't take over other ranking factors. Is that a fair top-level assessment?
No, I suppose, yes. Probably have to see that in writing to make sure that I kind of I fully understand every single word of it and how they fit together. But yes, generally speaking, yeah, Eric, I think I'm there with you. We kind of
Eric, can I slightly disagree with that last sentence in there? And this is just based on what Gary and I tweeted back and forth the other day, which is, I think the idea of Rankbrain is that it can reorder or reweight ranking elements in order to produce more relevant results.
I think that was I understand what he wrote. I'm still, based on the discussions I've had, I'm still at ranking factors here.
Yep.
Better match query with content does impact ranking, but it doesn't change whether you pick a link signal as a ranking factor or some other signals are ranking factors.
You have to understand, you get them all at the same time. But I mean, at the very simple level, if you know, in the example that Gary gave with the Mario Karts without cheats, right? It's just that it's not the weight that you assign to the word without in that query and its presence on the pages that you're going to show for this or not going to show for this. It's more the fact that how you treat this word. You start this. It's almost I don't know. It's hard to kind of structure this answer clearly as well. Because when you look at it like that, you're almost prone to saying, yeah, here's a ranking factor, because now we're going to grab onto those pages that do have this word, but it's not just about the word without, right? It's about the context that of the whole discussion around this on this page, right? And the funny thing is that I guess it's not looking only at it's looking at what's on the page, but also how well it met the expectations of people who then interacted with that. Is that, you know, did us guessing that this particular word indicated a particular intent? Was that a right kind of guess? And gathering that data continuously and then saying, you know what, fair enough, now we're kind of confident that these words or these combinations of words indicate a particular intent, so we need to pay attention to such and such content. But it's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily mean that all of a sudden links are more or less important for this page or that page. They're still as important as they were, but now we say, well, there's also this other thing. On top of everything we know, we also know that for this query, this is particularly important.
So one of the things, we've been having this little back and forth in the side chat. We were saying that one of the reasons that this is so tricky for Googlers to answer is that sometimes changing the query, your understanding of the query, can change the ranking factors a little bit. There are certain factors we know about your money or your life ones, for example, where when a query is to do with finance or health, you are much more careful about the answers given. There are extra factors of trust that should be applied. Now,
Right.
where a query might not have been understood to be about finance or about health, those wouldn't be in effect, and by better understanding it, it suddenly is, so it can change that. You can also say that where you've got a query where it has demand for freshness, i.e. we're looking for news here. Again, if you didn't understand the query was about news, that wouldn't be applied, and links would count more. Whereas once you do understand this is actually about a news story, freshness counts more. And so it can affect rankings, but only through better understanding of the query. Is that about right?
That's the way I look at it, at least. And I'm sure we're going to hear a lot of comments about this, and probably the discussion will go on, but that's the way I see this at the moment.
Right. So we've been having an argument here in the side chat, and what we just said is consistent with my understanding of what makes sense. I don't see that as changing the core ranking algos, but it might change the core ranking algos you choose to apply to the query, because your understanding of the query changed.
Can I ask a quick question that's semi-related, which is just around machine